Congratulations, you found the one station that plays Ghana's best urban music.
I like to come up with a song on the radio.
YFM.
Listen to YFM 107.9 Accra, 102.5 Kumasi, and 97.9 in Takoradi.
Our guest on the Y Leaderboard series today has spent most part of his life in service to humanity through the ministry of Christ. He is a graduate of the University of Professional Studies, Legon Maranatha University College, and the Baptist Theological Seminary at Richmond, Virginia, USA, and a Master of Divinity Christian Education major degree. He is also a PhD holder from the University of Richmond. He worked as a corporate accountant for 17 years as a CEO of Multimedia Technology Limited. He served for 10 years between 1990 and 2000 as the chair of the Human Resource Committee of the Ghana Baptist Convention. And he also served for 6 years between 2000 and 2006 as the chair of the Ghana Baptist Convention's International Mission Committee, supervising the convention's church planting work in Europe and the USA. He also, until his new appointment actually as executive president of the Ghana Baptist Convention, he was a senior pastor of the Charismatic Baptist Church in Taifa, Accra, for 25 years between 1988 to 2013. He is the vice president of the Association of Baptist Business Executives, Accra chapter, and one of the 12 elected vice presidents of the Baptist World Alliance. He's also the vice chairman of the Christian Council of Ghana. He also served as a minister of mission of the First African Baptist Church, Richmond, Virginia, pursuing his master's degree at the Baptist Theological Seminary. Now, through his ministry, the Lord has planted 5 Baptist churches in Kumasi, Taifa, Liberty at Ofanko, Living Streams at Atomic, Accra, and Charismatic Baptist Mission, North Taifa, and 2 campus Christian fellowships at Kumasi Academy and the University of Professional Studies. He is a founding member of the Evangelical Music Ministry, the New Creation in Kumasi, and he's currently executive president of the Ghana Baptist Convention, vice president of the Baptist World Alliance, and chancellor of the Ghana Baptist University College. His name is Reverend Dr. Ernest Adu-Gyamfi, the newly appointed chairman of the National Peace Council, and he is our guest this morning on the Y Leaderboard series. Congratulations, sir, on your new role, and best wishes from all of us here at the GMA Group. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Great to have you. Reading your work is already inspiring, so we are looking forward to a great conversation. We want to actually start with your childhood. What was growing up like? As the last of 3 siblings, how was a family system like in those days?
Thank you very much. Well, as you said, I grew up mainly in Kumasi. I was born at Asafo.
Okay.
And later on, we relocated to Asokwa residential area. That's directly behind the sports stadium. My mother had 3 children, but my father had 36, with about 7 different women. And so growing up was in a very big family home. But we had our own house, and quite a big house, so all of us were accommodated there. I went to Mankwetia Early Primary School, which is directly behind the Kumasi Sports Stadium, and then Mankwetia Middle School. From there, I went to Konongo Secondary School for a year, and then relocated to Kumasi Academy. That's where I did my secondary school. Growing up was fun.
What are some of your favorite memories?
Well, we played football and played table tennis. I was quite good in table tennis, so by the time I was in secondary school, I was a school player on table tennis, both in Konongo Secondary School and Kumasi Academy. We played a lot of soccer all around, from Asafo to Amakom to Asokwa. Those were great times of enjoyment. Then we enjoyed a little bit of movies. Movie in those days was big time, unlike what we see now. We had Rex, Odeon, and those others that were there.
The cinemas.
And so once you are bored, you go to the cinemas to enjoy yourself. So it was quite a great fun.
What kind of movies did they show on the screens?
There were all kinds of stuff, Western, Indian, and other blockbusters that we see today. There were a lot of those things.
Okay. Tell us about your time at Konongo Secondary School and later Kumasi Academy and how it shaped you and your outlook on the world.
Well, I went to Konongo initially because I thought that school was Konongo Dumasi Secondary School. And those days, a lot of private schools were springing up. So when I applied to go to the school, I got there and realized that I was in the wrong school. This was a private school. Right. So it was a little tough, and but I had to endure it for a year. There were a lot of challenges in those days. Konongo was not as big as we see it today. And so it's a little rough moving from Kumasi to that locality. But it gave me a good foundation. I learned to toughen up a little bit because that was a new environment. And so a year after that, I came back to Kumasi Academy.
Okay. Can you tell us one of the challenges? Give us an experience. What happened in classrooms, in the field, something?
Well, you had problems of water shortage.
Yes.
And we had to go to a stream to fetch water, for instance. And as students, those were not used to that kind of lifestyle. But we endured it.
Yeah. And what were your aspirations during your developmental years? What would you say were your career preferences at that time? Did you know this is what you were going to do?
No. Initially, I thought I was going to be an engineer.
Okay.
That was my thought. So I was a science student in the secondary school. But when I left the secondary school, a cousin of mine who had done social studies in Ken University came to me and said, "Have you thought of accounting?" I said, when we were in school, science were the A class.
Yeah.
The others were B, business were C class. So why are you talking about a C class subject? Then he said, sit back and relax. Look at all the businesses that you see around. You go to the managing director, the deputy managing director, the next important person is the accountant. So why don't you think about that? And for the first time, it struck me. And so we made inquiries about University of Professional Studies, and there was vacancy. So I came to Accra and studied accounting. So that was how I shifted from engineering into accounting.
Accounting, okay. And did you enjoy the subject?
Initially, it was a struggle because it was a whole paradigm shift for me. My whole thinking had been science, and now here you are with something different. In fact, the first month in school, I just did not understand anything. They were talking about credits and debit and all those things. These were, commercial students who had come in, they knew what they were talking about. I was totally lost. And so after about a month, I said to myself, if I follow this class, I'm not going to get anything. So I spoke to my sisters who were then in the UK and told them to get me some books. And so I withdrew virtually from class for that whole first term and did studies on my own just to understand these basic things. And by the end of the term, I was all right, and then I could then match up with my colleagues.
That's great. Let's talk about your time at then IPS, now UPSA, where you studied accounting. What would you say? That was actually your first time moving to Accra,
yes,
right? What was that like? How quickly did you learn to adapt to your new environment?
I didn't see much difference between Kumasi and Accra.
Okay.
But then it was also another environment. And those days, IPS was also a private school. And so there were all kinds of challenges. The road from Presec to IPS, which is paved today, wasn't like that. And water was a challenge in that part of Medina. And sometimes we either had to walk to Trinity College to fetch water to bath. There were times we had to come to University of Ghana to take our shower and go walk back. So that was rough. And you had to walk all the way from that place to the Medina market to do your shopping. Accra had not developed the way we see it now. So it was quite a challenging environment being in that kind of situation.
And what were some of your great moments or most, inspiring moments there, most, those discussions that happen in class sometimes?
Well, there were two major things that I learned from IPS. One was to remain truthful to yourself. In those days, you could register with the professional accounting bodies either as a worker who is practicing accounting, or you could come in as a student. So A lot of the students had registered as accountants from or accounting personnel from different organizations. I came in as a student. I wasn't ready to cut corners. And so getting registered was a real challenge for me.
If you just tuned in, we are here on the Y Leaderboard series. We've got Reverend Dr. Ernest Adu-Gyamfi here, and we are having an inspiring conversation. Let me announce that the WhatsApp line is 020-2222-073. That's 020-222-073. Feel free to send your questions and more. There's a lot we want to share.
So those were really rough times. But then I stood my ground, and I was talking to the proprietor then, now Dr. Opukwampo, to register me as a student. And he wanted to make money. So the longer you stayed on campus, the more money he made. And so signing those documents took a while. It took me almost a year and a half to get registered with the Association of International Accountants. But to the glory of God, when I got registered, I was one of the first students to pass my foundation exams. I went into one sitting and got it straight. And most of my colleagues had not. So to me, being faithful and staying true to the principles that you've grown up with was very important to me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Faithful and staying true to yourself. Okay, so I think after this, your further educational exploits were all in theology or related courses. And would you say, was this a period where you were convicted to pursue ministry? You know, can you tell us a little bit about that period, the switch?
Most of my colleagues who were members of the Scripture Union in IPS at the time, I went in 1974 and came out in 1978. We were there. 1977, the government took over the school, so I stayed in for a year and then left. But most of my classmates...
The government took over the school?
Yes.
Okay.
From a program from 1977.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And so that was when it became under the government's control.
Yeah.
So I was there for a year, and then after that I left the school. But as I said, most of my colleagues in Scripture Union then became very dedicated Christians. And that was, the base of our call to ministry. Partly because of some of the experiences we had there. When we got to IPS, the Scripture Union there had been taken over by another ministry, the Spoken Word Ministry, or the Braham Movement. And we thought that was not right. So we actually had to fight that whole teaching on campus. It took us 2 years to do that and re-establish Scripture Union on campus. In that process, our commitment to the service of the Lord became deeper. Our knowledge of Scripture became deeper. And so when we left, said about 80% of that group came out as ministers. Very few practiced accounting up to today, or maybe a few of them have gone on retirement. But it was either a combination of accounting and ministry, or some went out to ministry, into ministry straight away.
Okay. And sorry. And during this period, what was the support like from your family and friends? You know, when you when you made the decision.
My parents never spoke about my Christian faith.
Okay.
My mother was highly supportive. My father was in between, but I got stuck to my commitment and stayed on. So when I left, I came into accounting practice. I worked first with a construction company for about 3 years. Then I went to Christian Service College and practiced accounting as an accountant and administrator for the school.
Okay.
And later on relocated to Accra Farms and became the assistant accountant. And after 2 years, I went to Techiman Farms and became the accountant. It's a sub-sector for Accra Farms.
Okay.
And then later on, I relocated to Accra to work with my father and that was in 1986. That was what brought me back to Accra. And I worked with him for 2 years and went into my private business from there.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your family life now. You are blessed with 3 children. What lessons have you learned from parenting, and how can young ones, begin? How can young ones beginning families, right, get it right?
Well, it's been an interesting experience having 3 children along with me and my wife. Our first child came in 1982, and he's quite grown now. In fact, all of them are grown and married, and it was quite interesting having these young ones with us. But God has been faithful in raising all of them.
And what role does your better half play in your life and in your ministry?
Very, very active role. In fact, she's with me almost wherever I go, except when the situation doesn't make it possible. She's a professional in her own right. She studied psychology, did developmental psychology, taught briefly at Ken UST, and then went into these CSOs.
Okay.
She worked with ActionAid, non-formal education, Right to Play, came back to ActionAid International, and she's on retirement now.
Okay. So that definitely complements.
That's right.
Yeah. So personally, what is the best thing about having a family of your own, especially a close-knit one? Personally, what would you say?
Right. Thanks for using the word close-knit. Our family is quite close-knit. Even though all our kids are grown, they are virtually around us every day. They come home almost every day. We have time with them. And it's a joy to see them grow up and be found in their own places of work and still making progress. It's quite an interesting experience to see that.
And now I want to know, how did your faith and resolve to get into ministry actually help you through that period of maintaining your trust, in superiors and colleagues? You talked about your accounting when you switched, and also I also want to know how your faith and resolve in ministry helped you grow.
Well, I think that for me, both faith and practical life are the same.
Yeah.
And I don't really separate them. And even when I was working as an accountant, I held on strongly to my faith, and I believed in certain principles of truthfulness and dedication to work and all of those things. And it's the same commitment that I apply to ministry. And sometimes people see me and wonder, why are you throwing yourself out like that? And I tell them, well, I've always been like that. In fact, when I was in private business, I did represent 3 different companies in this country. One from South Korea, one in Singapore, and one in the UK. And I was traveling all over the place, still studying at the same time. When I was in Maranatha, and so I was doing private studies. I was going in the evenings, every night I was in class. So my first degree took me almost 6 years, because I was doing a part-time work. And sometimes I'll travel around and do all my international travels and trade fairs and those things. By the time I get back, I'm in the classroom. Wow. So that whole experience has really toughened me in terms of commitment to work and dedication and throwing all out to serve the Lord.
So I guess it gave you your regimen for your daily life, how you should commit, how you should. I hear that. You had a brief stint as CEO as Multimedia Technology Limited. Can you tell us what the scope of its operations was like?
Multimedia began as an import company of cassette tapes. We started in 1988, and by 1991, we switched into assembling of cassette tapes. And so we had a facility to do that. And those days, cassettes were popular. And so we had equipment that could produce up to 20,000 cassettes a day. And so we've been in the whole music industry for quite a while. And I was there for 19 years.
Wow.
I worked with all the top musicians, both gospel and secular. Wow. And there were very few of us who started. I mean, myself, Chris Ankra of City Rock. Later on, we had Accra Sounds came in. SKD came on board. There are few of us who did those things. But we were quite involved, actively involved. And it was quite a big business. Because if you look at those days, we were doing about 1 container of cassette tapes every 10 days. That was real
Wow.
big business.
Wow.
You know, so there were a lot of people who were wondering how I could be a pastor and be there. But I felt that my business could easily support me in doing ministry. And so the first 12 years of pastoring, I was not earning any money from my church. All the money I had was what I used to build the church, because my business could sustain me. And for 17 years, I was there doing all of those things. But in the year 2000, at the close of 2005, I thought that the church had grown, had become bigger, and there was a need to make the sacrifice. And I was ready to sacrifice the business for ministry.
For the ministry. Hey, tapes now will be a lot of money. It's like vintage. Do you have some of them?
Well, I still have some in my living room.
Nice. All right. So, what sort of CEO would you say you were? In terms of especially how you managed the young people who worked for you.
Well, I have always maintained the concept of being an adaptive leader. In other words, I really adapt to every given situation and how the situation causes me to function here or there. But I have raised a lot of young people, both in business and also in church. Some of them are in various capacities now, very well established. And they still come back to me, even though I'm no longer in that kind of environment. But we took a lot of young people. Some of them were trained on the job. There was a gentleman that I took from one of our churches. He had no job. I employed him. He had gone to Accra Technical. I put him on the job to learn how to manage those equipment that we're using those days. Took him to South Korea to train him and bring him back. And by the time I did that, a lot of people were saying, "Are you sick? How can you take a Ghanaian boy abroad and train him? What are you going to get out of him?" But I was determined because I thought that the young people need to be given the chance. And once you give them the chance, they may excel. So I brought him back. And at a certain point, he became the technician in the country who was installing audio cassette equipment around the whole place. And most of the companies depended on him. So you can take anybody from anywhere and help that person to stand on his or her feet.
Thank you so much for sharing that experience. It's inspiring. I want to know, so based off of that, how important would you say workplace mentorship is? You said you're adaptive, so you would say you didn't have a structured approach to it. It was like, so for instance, in this person's case, this is what you did. With others, you did different things. And I wanted to ask, like, based off of that, how important would you say workplace mentorship is?
Yeah, for us in that kind of industry in those days, there was no school that taught anybody how to operate any of the equipment. And when we talk about cassette manufacturing in those days, they were very heavy equipment. We had these Tapematic tapes, machines that could produce between 400 cassettes an hour, sort of. And we had a lot of them lined up. Nobody had seen any of those things before. I went to South Korea to train on them, and I took this gentleman along. And so when we came back, we were virtually training everybody on the job. So we took the young guys, taught them how to do that. And as we kept moving, there were a lot more additions. Now you're looking at printers on cassettes, how to label cassettes. We're getting into artwork. We got into shrink wrapping. And these were equipment that they had never seen before. But they had to teach them all on the job. And partly because I was attending all the trade shows on audiovisual equipment and things around the world. So I knew how where the equipment we found, how they could be used. And I came back and took the young people and gave them a profession on the job. And so at the end of the day, most of them were able to stand on their own. Then later on, when we were transitioning to CDs, my company became the first that brought CDs into this country. And we did CD duplication and that sort of thing. When Reggie Rockstone released his first CD, we produced it. Yeah. So we've been there with all the big and.
That's such a diverse, background of experience. Thank you. So, looking back, would you say you made the best decisions in terms of career choices? And if given the opportunity, would you want to alter some of those decisions you took early in life?
No, I think that those things prepared me for several things. In terms of my accounting profession, now that I'm the head of church, it gives me the opportunity to be able to interpret every accounting information that is before me. And I can make input into them. I can critique my accountants or director of finance because I see the figures, I understand them, and I can give interpretation to them. It also helps me in forecasting because I've done cost accounting and all of those things. So in terms of budgeting and others, I understand what it means. And sometimes I make input into some of the things they do. So those things have really helped in terms of shaping me. Then in terms of commitment to work, because once you get into private business, it's virtually 24/7. You know, and especially in those days, around this time of the year, from mid-November until about the first week of January, we worked 24 hours every day. Because those were the times that music was being released. You could find Kojo Entry coming out, Lumba is coming out, Amachi Dede is coming out, Tego Sisters is coming out. Everybody's releasing music towards Christmas. And so around that time, you had to work 24 hours.
Wow.
And there were times that I slept for about 3 or 4 hours a day. Because the cycle was running, we had to break our staff into two. One team would come in the morning, another team would come in the evening. And one day I recall, we had a late order when one of the musicians brought in an order around 5 p.m. And I told my staff to stay on the job and get it done, see what we can do to catch up. I was sitting in my office, I saw them pass by one. I thought they were going to use the washroom. After about an hour, I could not hear any of the machines running. So I went to the production field to see what was there. When I got there, everybody was gone.
Wow.
They had shut down all the machines and left.
Wow.
I had an in-law who used to work with us. And she was waiting because I was going to give her a lift home. So when I saw that, I came back, I said, look, if these guys come in the morning and this job was not done, we're going to be in trouble. So I rolled up my sleeve, took off my jacket, took off my tie, and switched out the machines myself and called my in-law to come in. We stayed on the job. I worked up till 4 a.m.
Wow.
By 4 a.m., I had produced 8,000 cassettes.
Wow.
Yes.
What? 2 people,
Yes, just
8,000
2 people.
cassettes?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I left a note and placed it on the cassettes that by the time I come back by 10 a.m.,
Yeah.
I expect that the cassettes are labeled, they are packed and ready to go. When I got to the office the next morning, all my staff were shaking because they thought I was going to sack them. But I told them that, look, I trained you guys on the job. You can never bluff me. Because I put my hands to the plow. I know what to do. I know how to manage all this. So you either stay here or leave. So having hands-on on any job helps. And for most people in businesses, these are things that they need to learn. Don't just employ people and put them there. You must know how to do it yourself. And it helps sometimes.
This was building the quality of people, and also the way you acted and reacted to it it would just be new for them. You know, you didn't do the reactionary.
That's right.
Interesting. So now let's move to your ministry. You know, at which point did you decide to go into full-time ministry, and how ready were you for this new chapter in your life?
Well, as I said earlier on, I resigned in the close of 2005. It took me almost 6 years to make that transition.
Okay.
And,
so it wasn't just an immediate...
No. So anytime I told my staff, I think I need to leave. And whenever I said it, they thought, well, will this man be able to leave us? No, but it went on and on and on until the close of 2005. I felt that, look, this is time to step out. I had a partner, so he was there. So I told him, look, take over, I'm gone. And even when I announced to my church that at the 31st night service, that from today, I'm no longer going to the business, everybody looked at me, they were shocked. It was like, is it real? Are we going to be able to pay this man? That is coming on full time. You know, all those questions were there. Because then I had my own house, I had my car, and from about 97, we had switched into buying brand new vehicles and that kind of thing. So I had everything that I needed, and I thought that, why do I stay here and keep working on myself and trying to develop? You have this congregation that is there that needs your service. Why don't you step out? And after all, how much money do I need at this time to live on? So that was when I made the transition. And for me, initially, it wasn't about money. I was not bothered about that. My commitment was to serve my people and to do the best I can. And so I began on a very low salary and gradually built up as the ministry kept on. Certain things also came on board.
Walk us through your experience overseas as chair of the Ghana Baptist Convention's International Mission Committee, supervising the convention's church planting work in Europe and the USA.
In around 2003, 2004, the convention had a strategic plan. And while we were working on the strategic plan, the thought of planting churches outside the country came up. And so when we raised it, there were a lot of people who were a little bit skeptical about it, because how are we going to do this? But I chose the option of embracing this whole idea because I had been traveling outside as a result of my business. I've seen Ghanaian Baptists who were outside, and I thought that it was time for us to bring them together. But one of our pastors had studied in the U.S., and before he came, he planted the first church in Bronx, in New York. And so that became our base, and we thought we could do that. Then we engaged one of our pastors, who was then the pastor at Grace Baptist Church in Kumasi, sent him out as a missionary to go and study what is going on in the U.S. and see what could be done. He went for 6 months. By the time he came back, we had a church in Virginia, we had a church in Massachusetts, we had a church in Denver, Colorado, and we had a church in Columbus, Ohio. So when he came back and we saw that that base could be done, we seconded him to go to the U.S. So he left Grace Baptist Church and went to the U.S. And once he was there, it became the base. So now I could go over and look at all the things that we're doing. Currently, the Ghana Baptist Convention has 18 churches in the U.S. and also in Canada. And now we have gone back into Europe. We are in Amsterdam, we are in Belgium, we are in Germany, we are in Italy. What else? About 5 of those in those places as well.
Where would you say are your most vibrant branches?
Currently, the most vibrant is the church in New York.
In New York,
That
okay.
is quite big,
Okay.
and because of its location. The next one is the one in Columbus, Ohio. They have quite a big facility now.
Okay. So I want to ask this question. Apart from being grounded and knowledgeable in the word, what other important traits must a minister have to be able to take up that role?
Well, the trait of honesty and commitment to work, and especially serving the people without looking for real material wealth. I think it's been the major problem that the current generation has, where people go into ministry and they think it's a source of making money. For me, I think that our calling is to help people find the Lord, help them established in the Lord, and help them to walk faithfully in the Lord. And that is the priority. I believe that anybody who does those things faithfully will be rewarded in one way or the other.
If you just tuned in, we've got the Y Leaderboard series. We are having a very, very interesting conversation. Let me remind you that the WhatsApp line is 020-2222-073. That's 020-222-073. And you can also hit us up on our socials with any questions you have at Y1079FM. And also, please do add the hashtag MMRS, and I'll pass on your questions. So let's continue with this. So I actually, we were talking about, you were talking about the current generation and how balancing, ministry, people going for material wealth sometimes. So balancing that. If someone wants to ask, how do I balance? I also need to survive. I also need to take care of my family, but I also want to give my life to doing this work. What tips can you share? Does that mean I should have another job while I'm doing this? What tips can you share to be able to fully be invested in both areas and still survive, still take care of my family?
Well, I think that it's the responsibility of churches to take care of their ministers. That's the first basic thing that I'll say. But the minister of the gospel should not make money a priority. There's a friend of mine in the US who had a brother here. And when I was in business, he wanted me to help this brother. I've tried doing everything for this gentleman. He was not ready for it. Then one day I saw him and I said, why are you not ready for any of those? He said he wants to be a pastor. So I asked him, why do you want to be a pastor? His response was that in my family, all my brother or siblings are doctors and professors and this. So I want to also get a profession where when I get in there, I'll feel respected. Now, if somebody goes into ministry with that kind of mentality, you've already lost it. It is not the prestige. It is not the money. It is not what you make out of it. It is God calling us to serve his people and to bring his people closer to him. So that should be the number one priority for anybody who is in ministry. And the Bible makes it clear, if you seek the Lord and seek him faithfully, all other things will be added. If you build a congregation faithfully and truthfully, your congregation will take care of you. So I expect people to see these things and commit themselves to the things they do.
Okay, so I want to talk about the churches you've planted both locally, and abroad. Which one of these churches would you say has a compelling story from your perspective? You know?
Well, it's a challenge planting churches outside the country. One because of the financial commitments involved. And so each of them have a compelling story. But our biggest church in New York, I think, has quite an experience. They started building their own church almost 6 years ago. They had the money, they had the bank financing, they started everything. And for almost 6 years in the US, the building is not complete. And sometimes I go there and ask myself, what is going on? The contractors come to site, it's left with the elevator, they fix one thing, the next 3 months you won't find them. They come back, they do one thing, they leave. Another time, and it's been on and on and on and on for 6 years, and everybody does not seem to understand what is going on. So when you see that kind of thing, it puts you back, and you ask yourself, what is really happening here? Because in that system, you expect that people will be committed to what they do, they sign contracts, they'll be faithful, they will get it executed, and all that. And for the last 3 years, they keep telling me, oh, by the time you come back for your next visit, we'll be dedicating the building. You get back and it's the same state. And that is a challenge. And so we keep praying that God will grant us a breakthrough, that these things will be restored, that the people will get back and find real fellowship. But it's quite a nice edifice. Once it's done, it's going to be a very wonderful place of worship.
So I want to ask, you've published a book titled Tribal Allegiance and the Health of a Church, a case study of Calvary Baptist Church at Accra. How detrimental is this phenomenon to the church, and how does it manifest itself in the church's activities?
Well, in the course of study, I did not only look at Calvary, but I also looked at the situation in our country. And so even though the things were situated within the church, most of the things that you find around are about the same. Now, Calvary is one church that has about 7 services in the Abraka setup. They have the Akan service, they have Gan, they have Ewe, they have English, and they have French. And gradually, what I was seeing was that, especially when they come to the Akan, Ewe, and Gan services, the Akan started playing the traditional drums. They started wearing dancing cry. And I suddenly realized that they were depicting more of their culture. The Gans brought Bowobo into church. So gradually you see that you have one whole family, but the introduction of these things is gradually bringing a certain tribal effect within the church. The question is, how do you as one body stay within that concept and still be able to navigate your way through? So that was what I investigated. Made certain recommendations for the church to look at, because it could be a potential problem in future. Now, it's the same thing happening in our country. It's one country, but you get to a point where people are beginning to play the tribal cards. And I thought it's one of the most dangerous things. We are Ghanaians, number one. And everybody must see him or herself as a Ghanaian and not from my tribe, from my school, or from anything. So those were the things that I examined. And I think that this is a very good lesson for all of us.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, I want to ask this question, right? Through it all, which has brought more challenges, the environment within which the church is planted or the people involved?
Sometimes it's I'll say both. when the church is situated in a certain environment, it has its own challenges. I've done some study on the issue of the ban on drumming and dancing, for instance.
Okay.
I've done a study on the use of the hijab and the difficulties that came along with those things. Now, when a church is planted within a certain community, especially in a typical Ghana community, when you have the ban on drumming and dancing and you decide not to obey those things, you begin to realize that you already have a problem. And several churches have gone into that kind of problem, navigating themselves through some of those things. So sometimes the environment can be a major challenge. Then you also have sometimes the people who are there. In the area of these tribal sentiments, if the people themselves begin to become much more tribalistic, instead of focusing on why they are there to worship and to serve the Lord together, it becomes a challenge. And several churches have them. And you go to some churches, there's this group, there's that group, and sometimes we are not sure what is going on and all of that. These are some of the challenges that we see. But I think that it can come from both ends.
Okay. Thank you so much for that well-rounded answer. So I'm just going to break into our interview a little bit because we've got a surprise caller on the line to talk to you. And hello? I want him to introduce himself. Hello. Hi.
Hello, sir.
Hi, how are you doing? Good morning.
Good morning. I'm doing great. How are you too?
We are fine. Thank you. So he's here. Is there anything you want to say? I've not told him who is on the line. But is there anything you want to say about this great man we've been talking to this morning? And how you know him?
Sure. What I have to say to Reverend Dr. Ernest Adu-Gyamfi is, well, obviously, your time wouldn't allow me to say enough, but I can say that he's just a great person to know. And for me, my life testimony is that I thank God that in the scheme of things, God brought him into my life. There's so much that I have learned from him as a person, as a minister of God, and as a family man, and I'm sure most of the things that he's taught on the pulpit and in his business would shape my life as a person, an individual, to the rest of my life, actually. So there's just so great testimony I have to share about him. And I was just listening to the interview, and I just want to say that we are all proud of him. For the many of us that are set under his feet to be taught and to have had the opportunity to learn from this man, it's been a privilege for us. And all I want to say is that God bless his life. And we see God still using him. We know that there's so much he still has in him to offer to this country and then the young people of our nation. Yeah, so that's just what I want to say as my initial comments for now.
Okay, Reverend, can you tell who is speaking yet?
Not yet.
No. Do you want to introduce yourself now?
Yeah, so good morning, Reverend. This is your boy, your son, Kwame Frikia. I'm sure this is a big surprise. You were not thinking of me calling, but I thought we had to call through and then say some words. We're proud of you. I personally am very proud of you, and may God bless you for the good work you keep doing. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Kwame.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for calling. Thank you for the good words you shared and adding to this story this morning. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. Yes. So that was a brief interlude. How do you feel, sir?
Well, it's quite encouraging. These are some of the young guys that we've been raised, especially when you see them that young. Some of them, when they were born, I named them, I dedicated them, I baptized them, and taught them in class and in Sunday school. And for him in particular, to see him grow and now become a top guy at the EPA, it's encouragement, very encouraging. And not only that, but he's become one of the associate pastors in my former church. So to see those young people grow from that level to where they are now, it becomes an encouragement. And for him to combine ministry and work, understand now he lives somewhere around Efienya, and yet he drives all the way to Taifa to do church and go back. But these are things they saw me doing. When I started the church in Taifa, I was in my 7. I relocated to Manet Cottage on the Spinders Road, and those days this road wasn't the way it is now. So I had to drive all the way to Taifa, close from church around 10 p.m. and drive back home and go back. Later on I moved to Abokobi. So always been on the outskirts and doing all this, combining that with business and all of traveling and doing. And so most of the young people saw that and realized that they can also do it. And to me, that's an encouragement to get them doing some of the things they're doing now.
Okay, so let's talk about your time at let's talk about the National Peace Council, actually. First of all, what is the core function for people who don't know?
Right. There are a lot of things that the Peace Council is supposed to do. Let me see if I can get it properly out. The objective is to harmonize and coordinate conflict prevention, management, resolution, and build sustainable peace through networking and coordination, and also to strengthen the capacities for conflict prevention, management, resolution, sustainable peace in the country, including but not limited to chiefs, women, youth groups, community organizations, to create the awareness of some of these. So these are some of the core things we've been doing. For most people, they think that the Peace Council is an election machinery, but that is not. There are a lot of things that we do that people hardly hear of. And because we are mediators, and so it is necessary to create a certain neutrality and not be putting too much information out, but then do your covert operations and get people to settle down and those things. And so for most of the hotspots that you see in this country, we are there. And we're doing all the things to prevent conflict. For this election, it's a whole machinery that's at work now. And we do so many things.
Nice. What would you say you need to be a good mediator, especially when you're in hot spots, hot times?
Well, the first thing is that you need to maintain neutrality. And so you see that throughout the life of the Peace Council, sometimes you get up in the morning, depending on what the issues are, they will say that the Peace Council are NDC. And that by the close of the evening, they say they are MPP.
Yeah.
And it's a sense of neutrality that people hardly get from us. And so when there are some issues, for instance, people expect you, why they did this, why didn't you comment? If I throw out a comment initially, it makes it difficult to negotiate and to mediate. So sometimes we are very careful. The second thing is to ascertain the facts and the truth about an issue before we start talking. So sometimes the issue is, why is the Peace Council not saying anything? If we don't have the facts, we don't go out to speak. And so we have, currently, we have networks around the whole country, picking information about all that is going on and bringing them. We have a team that analyzes that information critically. They will go out and look for all the facts before it's brought to the attention of the board. By the time it gets to the board, we have a clarity as to what is actually going on before we speak to the issues. And sometimes those processes will take time. Yeah. Then, past 2 weeks, there was an issue in the north, and somebody said, why is the Peace Council not speaking? Somebody, I think I got 2 about the radio stations calling me, what are you saying? And I said, yes, we will speak to it because the board is yet to meet. We have sent our people up north to investigate the case and bring the issue to us. When it finally got to us, the base of the problem was chieftaincy and not political. So you may go out and condemn a party. By the time you get into the issue, you realize that that is not where the issue is at all. So those are the reasons why sometimes we appear to be slow. But the fact is, until we have all the facts and we have clarity, we will not say anything. Because you need to maintain that neutrality.
So I want us to talk about the council has actually heavily been involved in the formulation of the Vigilantism and Related Offences Act. As the new head of council, would you consider this move a game changer for peace?
Yes, it is. We're all part of the negotiation because I serve on the old board, and then I'm currently in the new board. It is necessary for us to come to this, to the point where this document, the Parliament passed it, and also got the two political parties to sign to it, and also set up the roadmap for the disbandment of vigilante groups. We have set up monitoring teams to monitor what is going on across the country, so that we will know exactly what is going on. Now, currently, what we are observing is that it is not the political party per se that is perpetuating some of the things, but the parliamentary aspirants. So that's why those things are within certain constituencies. So you have a situation where there's a certain parliamentarian, there's a certain DCE or MCE who is competing with the parliamentary candidate. So the MCE or DCE has certain clout in terms of that area. The parliamentary candidates also think that I have certain clout in that area, and then they begin all those things. But we have identified some of them. We have achieved some success in areas where in some localities they have signed to peace agreements between the parliamentary candidates. Some have engaged in peace work and all of those things. So those things have been helpful. Then on our part as a council, we are trying to reach all the 270 constituencies to educate people about the vigilante bill and what is involved. Because if you are caught by that act, you can go to prison for between 10 to 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And people don't know. So all the land guards and all the people who are misbehaving around, if you are caught by that law, you will go to jail for between 10 to 15 years. And so we keep doing that kind of education. Currently, we've covered about 80 constituencies, and we are still moving. There's a team going to Kumasi today. There's a program going on. There's another team have another program tomorrow. Over the weekend, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'll be in Tamale. We are going to be in Damango, then to move to Tamale and to see other things. So a lot of education is going on, helping people to understand that there is a need for us to disband these things. Politics is about exchange of ideas. It's not about fighting. And for where we sit as mediators, you might even hear the politicians sitting on radio stations and be screaming. But once they get out of this door and you see them outside, they throw their hands around themselves and they will say, "Charlie, it was a good game." That's what they call it, a game. And we are fighting. And we've seen it over and over and over and over. So I appeal to the young people is don't allow yourself to be used. Don't allow yourself to be used. Go about your daily work, make money, and enjoy your life. At the end of the day, they call it a game. One person will win, one person will lose. So even what we are going through now is they are playing their game. And so they carry all of us along. People are screaming and shouting and doing. So we try to stay neutral and help people to understand that let's calm down, go through the election process, and at the end of the day, whoever wins takes over, and then we have our peace. For me, I don't care who rules this country. For as long as there is peace, there's stability, economy is good, and I can sleep and sleep well, I don't care. And I think people need to understand those things.
See, I think that's also where I'm at. As long as I can sleep, peace. So with this conversation we're having, I want to ask, what role would you say the church must play to protect our democracy and ensure peace during and after the elections?
Thank you. In the first place, I've seen that a lot of churches have various programs going on at the moment. Now, the church ought to be involved in this whole peace architecture. One, because most of our members are the ones doing the politics. If 80% of Ghanaians are found in the church, or so-called Christians, sometimes the question I ask myself is, why are we going through all the problems we're going through? The church has a role to play. In the past, the church stood back and looked at politics as a dirty game. And so, leave them alone, don't get involved. But then, with time, we realize that we can't leave the politicians alone. And every denominational head now thinks that it's important for them to have some level of conversation with their political players. For us as Peace Council, one of the things that amazes us is that when we go into some of these mediations, and the people sit before us, and they see their heads of churches line up, sometimes they throw the rhetoric outside. Because here you are elder in the Church of Pentecost, Opokunyana is sitting there. What do? You can't be misbehaving, because as soon as you leave the place, he goes back to the church and says, take the guy off. So some of them see those things. You come Methodist Church, the presiding bishop is sitting there. How do you go back and behave? You're Baptist, you come, your president is sitting there. How do you behave? So the church has a role. We have a lot of influence. And especially when it comes to the composition of the Peace Council, not only the church, but other faith-based leaders who are also there. It gives me an impression that the church and the faith-based organizations have a critical role to play in terms of the peace of this country. We need to speak about it, we need to teach about it, and we need to bring our parliamentarians under a certain control. If you follow up on them consistently, and consistently pray for them and talk to them, we can get some changes done in our
and demand accountability. So we are just talking about the influence of the church. I want to bring this conversation to Africa. So most critics of religion actually argue that religion has caused more harm than good. To Africa's human capital development. What's your take on this?
I don't think that is wholly true. The problem we see in the whole of Africa is that there are a few bad nuts who are so vocal and so prominent that sometimes it looks like they are the only people who represent the church. Look at what we do in this country. How many Catholic schools are in Ghana? How many Catholic hospitals are in Ghana? Presbyterian, Methodist, SDA, Baptist, all the others. Look at them. If you look at health in this country, the Christian Health Association controls about 40% of the health needs of this country. So if the church pulls out immediately, the system will collapse. But most time, people don't see those good things. You'll notice that when nurses go on strike in public setups, all the Christian Health Association facilities continue to run. Because our commitment is that you cannot be within this environment and go on strike. So there are a lot of positives coming from the church. But sometimes the few who are creating problems are so highlighted, they dominate the media landscape, they dominate the social media, and so we see more of those and we think that everything has gone haywire. But then we also have a responsibility to try and bring these people under control. And there are a lot of things going on now, especially within this country, where some of these guys are gradually being brought under a certain level of control. It's difficult. For most of them, they don't belong to any association. They are neither in Christian Council, Pentecostal Council, Pentecostal Charismatic, they are not there. And so
if you don't belong to an association, it means anything can happen. You can break rules.
They do all those
things. They can't be controlled.
That's right.
There's no way they can be held accountable.
You see. And they are the ones, once you begin to complain about what they are doing, they come back and tell you that you don't have the anointing they have. That is why you're complaining.
So how do you control that? Because people can always pull that,
Yeah, they say all those things. But the fact is that if you look at some of us who are a little older, we've been through all that whole phase before. And what they call anointing now, we have also experienced it. Except that once you grow, your judgment and everything is different. We look at things from the development of the country, the peace of the country, and the progress of the country. And so when we are doing anything, we are mindful of these facts because it has implications. They think that the best thing they can do is shout and do all collect their money and be fooling around and be doing all those things. So it is a challenge in a way, but I think that gradually Ghanaians are being exposed to the truth. And with time, people will see those things and run away from them.
Okay. So we're about to wrap up, but before we do that, I want you to talk more around to our youth around electoral violence. So we know that unfortunately, some of the violence that has been happening has been perpetrated by young people. So as chair of the Peace Council, what is your message, for the youth listening right here on YFM, the station for the young and young at heart?
The It's so important for us to, as a country, to understand where we are. Information from the Electoral Commission shows that people between the age of 18 and 21, who are virtually first-time voters, who are on our voter list now, it's about 15.5% of the people. Those between the age of 21 to 35, about 55.5%. And between 36 to 45, we have 19.5%. If you add up the small group from age 15 to 45, we are looking at close to 80% of our Ghanaian population who are within that bracket. And that should speak to us as a nation that the majority of the people who are involved in this voter thing are youth. And the nation must give serious attention to that. Because if they destroy themselves and they destroy the nation, they have no future. Now, it's also the reason why some of those people within that bracket have become very active. Because they are in the majority now. And the nation must pay closer attention to some of the things going on. My appeal to this group is that they are too young and they have several years ahead of them. They should look at the peace and the prosperity of this country so that they can enjoy their own future. Don't allow any politician to use you. Don't follow anybody. I mean, most of these politicians will tell you, go and do this. Meanwhile, their own children have gone abroad. Some of them, had it not been for COVID, their family would have left by now, you know. So why are you allowing people to make use of you, to go and cause mayhem, and sometimes you are maimed, you are killed, and then at the end of the day, the politician is still there. So don't allow yourself to be used. On the day of election, go and cast your vote. You come back home and rest. In the evening, if you want to go and observe, you go there and observe what is going on. Then we can all have our peace. So every young person, both male and female, should understand that politicians call it a game. And we are not going to be players in that game.
That's a very, very powerful note to end on. Politicians call it a game, but we are not going to be called players in that game. Thank you so much, sir. It's been inspiring talking to you this morning. I'm sure everyone here who's been here has learned a few things, right? And some great tips. Any final words before we let you go? Gratitude you want to share to anyone who has supported you over the years?
Thank you very much to all those who have listened to us and those who have been praying for us and praying for our work and praying for our ministry. There are some challenges that we face as a peace council that probably we need to bring to the attention of the people. Sometimes the question people ask is, why is the peace council not doing this? Why they don't do it? Why they don't do this? We must understand that majority of the problem has to do with funding of the peace council. The act of the peace council said we're supposed to establish a peace fund where donors, public, and everybody could contribute to that. Now, for now, we are receiving subvention through the Ministry of Interior to support the work of the Peace Council. And especially if you look at where we are now, a lot of things are being done that are virtually ad hoc, and yet you are called upon to do them. Over the weekend, before the early part of last week, we had meetings with several organizations. We wanted to meet the political parties. We've met CPP, we've met NDC. We wanted to meet MPP, they postponed it. We got a message last night that MPP wants to meet us today at 2 o'clock.
Oh, wow.
Right. Now, what that means is that all our members who are everywhere must be called back to Accra immediately. You need to pay their transport, you need to pay their hotel bills and all of those. These are unplanned activities.
Wow.
Without the setting up of the peace fund, these things become a challenge. So the public must be made aware of this, and very soon we'll be launching the peace fund.
Okay.
To see how best we can get this done so that the support to get the work done can be done. And until we get there, people should bear with us. There are things that we can do within the constraints of the funding that we have. There are certain things that we cannot do. But as far as we are concerned, we are committed to make this country as peaceful as possible.
Thank you for the work you do. And how can people, okay, you said you'll be launching the fund eventually. So do we have a website that you want to maybe leave on air? Or
We're in touch with the Minister of Finance.
Okay.
Because all state organizations have their accounts at the Bank of Ghana.
Okay.
So we're trying to work out how best this can be done.
Okay.
But we'll be coming out soon with that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you for the work you do. Thank you for your ministry. And God bless you.
Well,
All right, so that's it for our Y Leaderboard series.
Congratulations. You found the one station that plays Ghana's best urban music.
I like to come up with a song on the radio.
YFM.
Listen to YFM 107.9 Accra, 102.5 Kumasi, and 97.9 at Takoradi.
YFM.